Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to 2026. Welcome to councillors at the table. I'm anticipating that Councillor Roger may join us by Zoom, but we haven't seen him yet. But it is 1:31 now and we will commence. Welcome to all of administration in the room and to those members of the public in the gallery. Thank you for joining us today. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for January 6th. It is, I think, an important day to remember the critical role that process plays in the delivery of democracy, and indeed the important role we all play in ensuring that process is followed. And I will leave it at that, but it's worth remembering on January 6th that process really does matter in democracy. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any errors? Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? If not, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Deputy Mayor Waxer, thank you for that. All those in favor? That is carried. There were none opposed, and reminds me that as I welcome Councillor Waxer to her new role now as Deputy Mayor for the next 2 months, I have this opportunity to thank Councillor Melnick as outgoing Deputy Mayor for his services during November and December of 2025. Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. Thank you, Councillor Melnick, and welcome, Councillor Waxer. We have one set of minutes for approval today. That is the minutes of the regular meeting of December 16th, 2025. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing none, I will look for a motion that council approve the minutes of December 16, 2025 regular council meeting as presented. Councillor Melnick, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That was carried. We have no delegations registered to speak to us at this time, but this is the point at our agenda where we welcome comment from members of the public present in the gallery who wish to speak to any item on our agenda. Pause for a moment, and I see Mr. Butler. Please come forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. New Year, everyone. I'm speaking to agenda item 6.4, the utilities billing model. Please don't be deceived by the language in the RFD around equity. There is little that's equitable about this billing model. Council made a decision years ago that a consumption-based model would be the most equitable, and arguably it is, or it could be, at least perhaps as close to equitable as other options. We acknowledge that efforts to find the most equitable way of billing for utilities is always there. Where this model goes completely sideways is where it overlays inequitable billing tiers on top of a consumption model. Billing based on consumption already imposes higher costs on those who consume more, tiering those consumption charges and then building in additional connection and capital charges and then tiering those destroys any sense that this model is equitable. Why does a resident in an apartment building pay more for a meter of water than you do in your single family homes? But they do. Why does a commercial user with a large connection to support a fire sprinkler system, and because they may be built to a modern standard, which usually is a larger connection, why do they end up paying much more than the small user per meter of water? A meter of water is a meter of water. A connection is a connection. A larger connection doesn't cost the municipality more, or at least not a lot more, than a small connection. Certainly nothing like the difference in the way we build. Why does a tourist staying in a hotel pay much more for their meter of water or meter of sewage than a tourist staying in a private home accommodation? That's not equitable. If you want to consider impacts on the system, single-family homes probably have the greatest impact, requiring more pipe, a curb cut for each, an individual account, and individual bills for every single-family home. Yet the model is designed to ensure single-family users pay the least. In terms of impact on the system compared to usage, larger accounts are likely the most efficient. One large account, one bill for multiple increment users. But they pay the most. If you want to think about proportionality, larger users should probably pay proportionately less, but we charge them proportionally much more. The model equates accounts with users, which is really not the case. Large accounts, like a apartment building, is really a collection of small individual users, but they pay more because they're treated as a large unit when really all they are is a large account. I'd say the same thing about hotels. They are a collection of small incremental individual users that we rely on to drive our economy, but we make them pay proportionally more. If you're going to build based on consumption, I think we should just do that. Those who pay more, who use more would pay more, and those who use less would pay less. Water is water, poop is poop. No one's water is more equal than others. No one's poop stinks less or more than others. And further to equity, we wonder, quoting from the RFD, who are the users that generate personal gain? And how is their use reflected in the model? Who's generating personal gain through the system, and where are they represented in this model? When we talk about users generating personal gain, are we talking about the same commercial ratepayers who already were taxing 5 times more than we tax the residents? They're using the water to pay our taxes that support the community, as we've discussed previously, to this tune of over 75%. So years ago, when council headed down the road to consumption-based billing, there was at least an argument that the model would be equitable. Sadly, because of the overly complex and the sharply tiered consumption, connection, and capital charges, the model is quite a long way from being equitable. This is not a good model. We ask that you just go back to consumption-based billing, if that's what council has settled on as, in principle, the right way to bill. Consumption-based billing should just charge everyone the same for an amount of water and everyone the same for an amount of sewer. And in doing that, the larger users pay more and the smaller users pay less, and it's at least relatively equitable. What we have is not, and this model does not work. I'd ask you to consider simplifying it and just going with a consumption-based model. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Are there any questions from councillors? It appears not. Oh, Councillor Mellon. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Butler, for the presentation regarding the current model that we have. You had talked about consumption as being the driver of the model, and equity within that model, that it should be reviewed. Do you have an opinion on how we would recapitalize our infrastructure that would also be equitable? among residents and businesses. Because part of my understanding when we passed the change was that we were building capital reserves so that we could continue to maintain and take care of infrastructure repairs that need to be done over time, because under the old model, we were never recouping as much capital investment as we needed to. And so that was a rationale that I voted for in the last term to bring in this model, because we needed to be able to start saving money for capital improvements in our wastewater and water system. And the intention, of course, is that the system would pay for itself. In other words, the users, at the end of the day, the property taxes are not used in the water treatment system. It's all based on this consumption model. I don't know if you thought any about suggestions that we could go down the road regarding the capital side and how we could recapitalize the infrastructure unless we charge each user on an annual basis in some form. That's where, like I say, the challenges with infrastructure in municipalities is how to collect the money to maintain aging and infrastructure that needs to be continually repaired.
Councillor Milner, thank you for the question. I don't think there's any reason that consumption charges cannot be allocated toward capital funding. I'm not arguing with the quantity of buildings in a year, and I appreciate the principle that the municipality is following, that the system should be, as so far as possible, operating on a cost recovery basis. But where we impose separate capital fees and then tier them so heavily against certain users, that seems inequitable. Could eliminate the capital and the connection fees and charge everything that needs to be charged through consumption. It would obviously be higher consumption fees, but it would eliminate other charges. It could be a way to go. I'm not suggesting we should not be called. It's a double negative. I do not mean to suggest that we should not be collecting for capital reserves. That's not part of my argument.
No, thank you. Appreciate that clarification.
If I can just make sure that I understand your argument, it is that we move to a completely consumption-based model. Cost recovery is a given. I think I heard you say, at least words to that effect, but that it would be more equitable to recover all costs, including capital and connection, from a single consumption fee, which I think we used to have, and I would argue that we do not now have a consumption model. We have that CCC model. And from my perspective, there is some equity, and I'm happy to accept that there are lots of ways to find inequity in building in the current system, but we can work to achieve greater equity. But if we drop, say, the connection fee and only move to consumption, then there is a cost that is not recognized. There is a cost to having a property connected to the municipal system, whether that property draws any water or not. So in the absence of any consumption, there would be no fee whatsoever, and yet people would still have the benefit of being connected to the municipal system that has to be supported. So I think in the sense that if our only avenue of revenue is through consumption, that in itself leads to inequities. So I'm with you to find equity, but I'm not sure that we achieve equity simply by moving to only a consumption fee.
What wasn't a question, but I see the point. There's a theoretical possibility of someone who doesn't use any water and would yet be benefited, or very little water and would yet be benefited from service. So maybe continuation of consumption, or sorry, continuation of connection fee of some sort, it does make sense. But the manner in which it is tiered, I do maintain is not at all equitable. Connection to the service is a way of charging and could be fair. But the overlay again of sharply tiered amounts is difficult to accept.
Understood. I thank you for that. And, I think we are in agreement that we are looking to achieve a degree of equity as much as we can. I'm not sure that it is the model that is at fault. It might be the implementation of the model. And maybe it can be restructured. Maybe the CCC model has merit, capital connection and consumption. But your argument is that the tiering in particular and other aspects of the mechanism of implementing the model are resulting in inequities.
Yeah, that's true. That is my argument. And if I might, I think that where we try to fund all costs, in particular capital costs and contributions to reserves through a billing model as we do, is fraught with difficulty. The taxation system is built to adapt to size and scale of property, and we know how to working. And so I think it is difficult to find an equitable way, a more equitable way than using the taxation system to fund some of those large and ongoing costs. And many municipalities go that route because we have made the decision to try to operate sort of a freestanding utility system that is funded on a cost recovery basis. We place ourselves in a difficult position of trying to quantify how we will bill those capital costs. If they're billed through the taxation system, then they are by nature billed relative to the size and value of the property. And maybe that is more equitable. So I take your point.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Any other questions? Here's none. Thank you, Mr. Butler. We are still on agenda item 4, delegations. Is there anyone else in the gallery who wishes to speak to council about any matter on the agenda? It appears not. So we will move to agenda item 5, correspondence. There is nothing on our agenda and nothing has arisen. I see from the look from our CAO, which takes us to agenda item 6, new business, and we begin with the Jasper Recovery Coordination Center progress update. Oh, and we have been joined by Councillor Roger, I see.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of council. As you've noticed over the last couple of months since the election, the JRCC updates have changed their shape somewhat. So instead of co-director Fark laying out the whole update, each time we're in front of you, one of the working groups is focusing on a priority. Today, the priority is, or the deep dive, if you will, is rebuild. So I'm going to walk you through the other priorities, the quick update, and then my colleague Emily Goldney from Parks Canada and I will walk you through the deep dive for the rebuild information. So you'll know me as the Director of Urban Design and Standards with the municipality, but one of the other hats I wear with Ms. Goldney beside me is as the co-director, co-lead, if you will, for the working group that focuses on rebuild. So summary of key recovery activities. One of the priorities obviously is debris removal, and the latest numbers on this front are that 393 permits have been issued for debris removal and certificates of completion have been issued for 367. And when it comes to site preparation right now, so this is the work that people do after the debris is removed to get ready for construction. We're now at a place where 358 properties have been confirmed safe for human health and ready for rebuild. So that is the vast majority of properties that were affected by the wildfire. On the interim housing front, we're really pleased to report that the museum interim housing site is fully occupied, and we're expecting occupancy at Patricia Circle and the United and Anglican Church sites here later in February in 2026. And a flag for me as I'm observing my colleagues in JRCC is they have processed over 900 applications for interim housing. So I just want to signal that as a lot of activity over the course of the last while. And there's a whole bunch of numbers on this slide, but right now when it comes to interim housing, there are 477 units that are available. 401 of those are occupied right now. And on the bottom of this slide, you'll see that of those 401, on the far right-hand side, you'll see that 354 households are being accommodated in interim housing, and that adds up to 676 individuals that are being housed in interim housing right now. And when it comes to the unit availability, this graphic just shows a little bit of what kind of units are out there. So the 120 dorms, there are 189 units out at Marmot Meadows, and then of course 167 in town. And then there are 20 units just fluctuating right now in the town site that will be available soon. Patricia Circle, there's 6 units, and then there's another 23 units that are going to be made available at the United Church site in February. And when it comes to economic recovery, this will be the topic of the next deep dive. So there's some simple information here. This is my bias right now, but there are now 11 active tenants in the interim industrial park. So that's assisting on the commercial side of things. We're often talking about housing and getting people in homes, but on the economic recovery side, having a place for businesses that were lost or damaged their premises in the fire. This is equally important. And then also ongoing at the pop-up village, there is an artist in residence currently at the creative space between the trees, the studio. And there is also some planning underway for some winter activities to happen at the pop-up village as well. And on the social recovery front of things, the fourth bullet there strikes me personally as important, which is that the JRCC supported the Jasper Food Bank with the holiday food hamper program. And that was funded by the Canadian Red Cross, but food hampers with a total value of $50,000 were distributed to assist up to 1,800 Jasper residents this holiday season that we just moved through. So that felt like also an important milestone. So for council, members of the public that are watching live or recorded, I just want to remind everyone that all of this information is in council's agenda package, and folks are free to go and have a read. There's a lot of information there. The deep dive today is about rebuild, and I'm really pleased to introduce my colleague, Emily Goldney. Council, this morning you saw how close Emily and I work together, and it's been a delight to work with our colleagues at Parks Canada, and I understand it has been a very long time since a Parks Canada person has been in the council chamber to present to you. So I just want to note that as an important milestone that represents our partnership behind the scenes. Ms. Goldney and I are going to walk you through some of the deep dive information focused on rebuild. And then after that, Ms. Goldney and I are available to answer any questions. And if there are any other JRCC questions, Director Fark is also here and available to answer questions. So I'm going to share the microphone with Ms. Goldney now, and we will walk you through some further information.
Perfect. All right. I'm not used to speaking on a microphone, so please bear with me. So my name's Emily Goldney. I work for Parks Canada as the Rebuild Planning Manager, and really excited to share with you today some highlights of our work over the past year. So the graph you see on the screen before you demonstrates all the development permits that Parks Canada has issued since the fire, both inside and outside of the town site. So as a reminder, a development permit is the first stage in the permitting process. So it confirms that a project conforms with Parks Canada Acts, policies, and regulations. There are two types of development permits that are displayed on this slide. So the dark red indicates permits that have been issued for rebuild if property is destroyed as a result of the wildfire. The light red, or the salmon color, if you will, displays other projects. So permits issued for things like a new apartment building, or a hotel renovation, or an addition to a house, a deck, a roof replacement. All those types of things would fall under the banner of normal operations and other projects. So as you can see from the time frame on this graph, immediately following the fire, most of the permit applications were for properties unaffected by the wildfire. They were for projects falling into that other category. As time went on, we started to issue a steady stream of rebuild and non-rebuild related permits ever since the fall, winter. There are a couple things I want to highlight with this graph. And one is that 2025 was truly an unprecedented year in terms of the volume of permit applications received and also the complexity of permit applications received. So in a typical year, the Parks Canada team would issue, give or take, 100 development permits, with only 5 or 10 of those being for more complex projects like a new home or a new building. In 2025 alone, we issued permits for over 180 non-rebuild related projects and 136 rebuild projects. So that's about 3 times more than the normal number of permits we would issue over the course of a typical year, and a big increase in the complexity of applications. The other thing I want to highlight is you can see the number of permits issued drops a little bit in November and December of 2025. And that's not necessarily because the work slowed down, far from it. But currently there is no backlog in applications. So every application for a development permit received is currently being reviewed by a Parks Canada Development Office. So our next slide here displays the number of building permits that have been issued since the wildfire. And as a reminder, a building permit confirms that a project conforms with relevant provincial safety codes. And a building permit is the go-ahead permit that enables someone to begin construction. As you can see from the graph, the first building permit for rebuilds, just like the other graph, the rebuilds are in dark orange and the other projects are the lighter color. So the first building permits for rebuilds were issued in March of 2025. As summer continued, more and more building permits were issued, and you can really see the results of this through all the construction activity in the community at the moment. Okay, so I just mentioned that permit volumes and permit complexity have increased significantly over the last year. But this graph shows you permit timelines throughout 2025. And I'm really happy to report that despite permit volumes increasing, permit timelines have improved significantly over time. This graph here displays 3 different types of applications. So the green line shows you applications that are complete and conforming. In other words, the application is for a project that conforms with Parks Canada policies and regulations, and it has all the information that we need to evaluate its conformity. The yellow line represents projects with minor nonconformities, so projects that need a couple of revisions before we can approve them. And the red line represents projects with significant areas of nonconformance that require quite a bit of back and forth before we can approve the project. I want to draw your attention to the green line in particular. So permit turnaround times for complete and conforming applications have decreased by 60% throughout 2025. From an average of 50 business days in January 2025 to 20 business days in November 2025. And this is a really significant accomplishment. Parks Canada has been able to lower application turnaround times by hiring and training more staff. We've added 17 new staff since the fire to support planning and development within the town site. Parks Canada has also been meeting with builders to educate them on how to submit better applications and clarify expectations. And Parks Canada has also made process improvements like streamlining variance approvals, removing requirements for foundation checks, and changing requirements for compliance deposits, all to streamline application turnaround times. I do want to highlight for anyone listening that, as a reminder, incomplete or non-conforming applications require a lot of back and forth communication between the development office and a proponent. They really increase the time and effort for applicants and can increase the workload for the development office, which can slow down the permitting turnaround time for everyone. So we really encourage applicants for any project, whether it's for a rebuild or anything else, to come talk to the development office. We're always happy to set up a pre-application meeting with individuals. The last thing we want is for a builder to design a building and work with the homeowner for months, only for the development office to have to deny it when it's time to permitting. So we really encourage everyone to come speak to the development office early and often. Before we move on to the next slide, the last thing I wanted to mention is we recognize that timelines matter, and the faster that permit applications can be reviewed, the faster community members can return home. So we will continue to work to streamline processes and reduce timelines throughout 2026.
So in the early days, post wildfire, our teams, parks and the municipality started working together to prepare for rebuilding. And at the end of October 2024, so not even 3 months after the fire, the rebuilding guide was published with a description of the process for everyone to rebuild. But also at that time, a series of amendments were made to the land use policy to facilitate both fire resilience, but also housing resilience as we rebuild. And then in November and December and January, we met with builders, so some community engagement with builders in particular. And the idea of a builder's guide was created. So one place for anybody building in town to understand how does it work, what's going on. So those were two important documents that got us to a place where we could have the graphs that Ms. Goldney just showed us. In March of 2025, Council also approved the Housing Action Plan, and in there were a series of actions to ensure that we don't rebuild in a way that recreates a 0% vacancy rate for housing in town. And every update that we've been making with parks, all of the work that we've been doing to update the land use policy over more than a year has always been with the intention of streamlining the regulations that guide the development process so we can get those graphs that we just saw.
Perfect. The other thing I wanted to mention with this slide in particular is that we continue to adapt in response to community concerns and feedback from builders. So some examples of our work to this end over the last year. The MOJ and Parks completed updates to policy parameters for construction in the R4 district in response to feedback from residents. In response to feedback from builders that there was some confusion about wildfire resiliency requirements, we clarified the specifications for building materials on resilience. And in response to concerns about storage and space for storage, we created a temporary use policy to allow for work camps and storage of construction materials on certain lots. And we look forward to continuing to respond to all of the new things that I'm sure will arise throughout 2026. So if council or anyone listening has feedback or concerns, we're always willing to hear it.
And this should be starting to be a familiar graphic for you folks. So this is a histogram that's going to grow and grow and grow. But what we can see here is the green, which is units, homes occupied by people, is growing, and the purple are the homes the properties where folks have yet to apply for a permit. So over time, we're gonna see here that the purple is gonna shrink and the green is gonna grow. But this is also a useful tool for us administratively to get a sense of how many people are in the permit process, which is the red. So whether it's a development permit or a building permit. And then also for ourselves and residents to see how many properties are under construction right now. That's the yellow. So this will paint a nice picture over time as a dashboard for us. And the same information is also displayed on the municipal website as a map. So this is another place where residents can go to see where are the properties where people are living in them, or they're under construction, or the homeowner or the leaseholder has yet to make any decisions about what they're gonna do. And all of those options are just fine for folks.
All right. So as we move forwards into 2026, we are anticipating a busy construction season. There were roughly 370 properties with buildings that were lost as a result of the fire, and 370 different recovery scenarios as a result. So we don't know how many will be rebuilding, but we expect many and many more. As construction progresses and more residents return home, we'll continue to focus on improving processes, supporting residents and businesses with their rebuilds, and responding to concerns as they arise. We'll continue to issue newsletters to industry and residents at regular intervals throughout the new year to keep the community informed throughout recovery. And I also just wanted to mention that there are often many rumors swirling around the community. I've heard lots of fun stories through 2025, many of which were not true. So I encourage anyone who hears something that seems to be not quite right to check the parks website, check the municipality website, or reach out to us directly at Jasper Development at pc.dc.ca to confirm whether a rumor is true before it snowballs into something larger.
And lastly, just want to remind council and residents, leaseholders out there that there are quite a few supports available for folks that are either at the beginning of the rebuild process or in the process of doing it. Pre-application meetings are available to meet with development officers, both at parks and the municipality. Both can meet online, you can meet in person, but there's a way to reach out and do that. There's a link on the slide here. There's also an insurance ombud service that's available now through the insurance companies. And then last and critically are also Red Cross supports. So Red Cross personnel are available to review construction contracts. They're available to provide support or potentially funding if needed for engineering surveys or assessments. And then also there's some professional services that are available through the Red Cross too. So that could be financial or legal services that could be available. So that concludes our presentation, Mayor Ireland, and over to you folks for any questions.
Thank you both very much for the presentation, and I will turn it to councillors and just remind you that not restricted to questions on the deep dive. There was a report, the update prior to that, for which we thank you, but questions for Director Sanders or Ms. Goldie at this time? Thank you, parents. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, I'll ask both the ladies today to just a couple of questions. You were mentioning, Emily, I believe, that there has been occasions where someone who is going through the development process and some things are flagged. Is that usually where it's first identified, or is it through the pre-screening with Beth's department, or what's the typical issue there?
So there's a variety of circumstances, but what we encourage individuals to do is to have a pre-application meeting with the development office, whether it's with Beth's team or the parks team, to bring in their preliminary plans and ideas. And at that meeting, we can meet with the builder and the proponent to say, okay, here are the policies you need to design to. Show us your preliminary plans. We can highlight any concerns at that time before the homeowner spends any money on detailed designs. There have been some cases where individuals have not had a pre-application meeting, or perhaps the builder was not clear on requirements and has designed something that does not conform to policy. So then when the permit application is submitted, any Parks Canada Development Officer reviews it, they'll then highlight that revisions are needed to the application, which adds time and effort, unfortunately, for the applicant.
Now, are these issues that are flagged, are they of significant nature, or is it something to do with safety code issues? Or is it a whole wide range of things? In other words, is it possible for an applicant to have gone through the development permit process and received development permit process, a permit rather? Is it conceivable that beyond that development permit stage, that there could be a significant flag arise, or is that unlikely?
Typically unlikely that there's a change of significant magnitude. Often the safety codes officers, when they review something at the building permit stage, will highlight that rise overrun on the stairs wasn't quite right, or they need a railing on their porch steps, or I'm using small examples, but there's often things in the plans review that come up, but they're typically able to be addressed within the existing design and don't require going back to ground zero when we get to the building permit stage.
So these would be safety issues, or glazing amounts, percentages, but there wouldn't be any significant issue as in that you hope to be flagged in terms of peak heights or something significant.
No, so at the development permit stage, we are evaluating the permit proposal against the different elements that are set out in the land use policy for the town site. So that is the stage at which things like setbacks, peak height, the masking, the site coverage, those elements are all set out in Parks Canada policy. And once we get to the building permit stage, the safety code review is more about how something is built. And that's for things like percentage of glazing and fire resistance ratings and those types of things come in. Does that help explain things?
Just speaking to the rumor mill, you do hear, I have heard people approach me and say that, you know, I had the development permit, and then down the road, they tell me that something of this nature is unacceptable and they have to go back to the drawing board. So that clearly doesn't happen.
Generally, it's not of a magnitude of change where you'd have to redo your whole design, for example. We encourage individuals to work with professional builders who should be designing to safety codes. I'm not intimately familiar with every single rebuild project that has happened, so there may have been instances where a design has had to be tweaked to meet safety code requirements, but to my knowledge, they're not of a significant magnitude that the whole structure has to be redesigned, or tweaks have to be made to ensure conformance to safety.
Yes, that's great. I know the just looking at the graphs and the percentages and the numbers of applications that have been put through in relatively short period of time is quite extraordinary. I think it's fair to say that we wouldn't have had this expedient exercise if it wasn't for the teamwork, if you will, of Parks Canada and the municipal land use people. Thank you so much.
Your Ireland, I think it's worth mentioning, just through you to Councillor Frechette, the distinction between the land use policy, which is the development permit, which is how big a building is and where it is, as Ms. Goldney said. The building permit is about safety codes, which isn't Parks Canada, but it's a requirement to have a building permit. So it's two very different bodies of work. A skilled builder is going to design for both of those things and should get through a development permit and a building permit quite easily without there being any upset.
Thank you for the clarity, Senators.
Thank you, Councillor Pichette. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Island, and thank you for this deep dive update today. I have a couple questions. My first is, I'm curious, I know we work together well. I'm just wondering, how much does Parks Canada work with our construction coordinator? Or is that a completely separate thing?
So development process wise, there's an application that comes in. comes into parks, they're gonna go through the development permits for the land use policy, they're gonna go through the building permit, which is safety codes. In that process, the municipality is advised that a permit application is in. And my department, for example, coordinates with the rest of the municipal departments to make sure that any conditions we need to be added to a permit are worked in. So that's one way we're integrated into the development approval process. Once those permits are approved, then we're in the realm of actual construction. So at that point in time, parks approvals are largely complete. And the construction coordination work that we're doing as a municipality is eyes on the ground to go out and make sure that, you know, our bylaws are being adhered to, et cetera. So it's the same, it's well been more coordinated, but it's also different stages of the project. And then what Parks is paying attention to at the end of construction is, of course, when you close off a building permit, you get an occupancy permit, and that's when Parks comes back in. But there's a difference between the construction of the building and then, for example, connecting with utilities, you know, crossing our sidewalks or using public amenity space like parking spaces on the street for lay down areas, that kind of thing. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for that. And then my other, I guess, question, maybe slash comment, I look at the rebuild progress graph, we're familiar with the colors, and it's just a reminder that, you know, even at this table, I think there is one of us in each color, I think, right? So it's still pretty spread out, and you know, right now it feels busy in town and there's a lot happening, but it's really only 20% are being built. And so the next few years are gonna be quite busy, and about 45%, if my math is right, kind of have something going on, whether they're either living in it or there's building happening or they have their permits in place. Is that typical of this kind of disaster? Like how, you know, everyone, you know, there's comments that we're slow, it's not happening fast enough, but I just wonder, like in another case where a fire has destroyed this many properties, how quickly does this happen? Like,
perhaps I might offer some assistance to that, Councillor Hall. So every community's disaster experience is different. And there's a lot of specificity around Jasper due to its location in a national park, distance to a major center, availability of a large native construction or development industry. Having said all of that, we are more or less on track for where we expected to be. So we had benchmarked approximately 75 to 100 reconstruction starts in the first year, and we were on the high end of that. We're just shy of 100 reconstruction starts. Fort Mac, Slave Lake, for example, they were both 3 to 4 years to hit 80% rebuild. Fort Mac was still at only 85% rebuild after 7 or 8 years. Having said that, there were specifics around the market and demand that affected that specific jurisdiction that would be different than for Jasper. So from my perspective, we are not behind. We are exactly more or less where we expected to be, given the complexity of Jasper's specific situation. And we, as Ms. Goldney indicated, anticipate a fairly robust reconstruction season next year, and most likely the following year. And then after that, we will start to see a tapering off, where there will be some residual properties, which for a variety of reasons will still be facing uncertainty or delays, etc. And so that number will tailor off. Having said that, at the same time, due to some of the regulation changes that Parks Canada and UDS worked on together, we're also seeing increases in density elsewhere. Via addition of the accessory dwelling units, some multifamily construction. So we do anticipate overall volume of residential units in Jasper to reach or even exceed pre-fire levels in a relatively short period of time, probably 3 to 4 years at the most.
thank you for that. And if I may, so we have projected about 75 first year. Is there a projection for next summer? I can't remember, we probably got it at some point, I just can't remember what the number would be.
Yeah, so in the first year, we hit benchmark between 75 and 100 reconstruction starts. This was a very rough back of the napkin calculation I did based on experiences in other communities and factoring in some of the specifics around Jasper. Similar benchmarking for next year, this is probably somewhere between the 120 and 140 range. Would probably be a reasonable benchmark to aim for. Again, considering that there will be limitations on the number of developers, material supplies, logistics, trades, etc., and where everybody is in their very specific recovery process.
Is that 120 to 140 in addition to the 75 that are already?
Right, and again, just to clarify, I believe we're at 98 so far for 2025. So we had said somewhere between 75 and 100, and we hit almost 100.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I think, it's really important that we are mindful of those that haven't started and the challenges that other residents have. And, being one of the green, I often feel guilt for being home where I have a colleague that's in the purple, right? So, yeah.
Very fair. So first of all, you should feel no guilt whatsoever, because your ability to be in your home frees up capacity for other people to navigate their journey, which is really important. And as we have said, and as Director Saunders pointed out, we have put in place a number of additional supports to try to help everybody, recognizing that each individual journey is specific, and help them guide them through that process to the best of our ability. So everybody's needs will be different, and we're trying to meet them where they're at to provide them with that assistance.
Thank you very much for the information.
I look for other questions, and at this time I don't see anything. So, I'm sorry. Deputy Mayor Waxer.
Thank you, Mayor Arden, through you to Director Sanders. You spoke briefly to an addition of an insurance ombudsman. And I believe you said it was through the insurance industry. I just wondered if you could elaborate on that.
I have nothing more to say than what you just said, Councillor Boxer, but I'm gonna defer here to Director Park.
So I'm not sure what specific what you're referencing. There is the Insurance Ombuds Office, which is essentially a private entity. They are not a governmental ombudsman's office, so they do not have the same legislative or regulatory powers that an ombudsman would have there, but they are set up essentially by industry to assist. So if you have a complaint, you can raise it with them, and they have a process where they can help complainants navigate a complaint process. So that does exist. That's at the federal level. In addition, there is the provincial insurance superintendent. So that office also allows for a complaint process and also offers resources to people who are having difficulty navigating with their insurance company. Those resources are outlined actually within the JRCC and on our website. So there is information there about those. So those are the two levels, as a federal and provincial level, of assistance programs. In addition, we have maintained a steady communication with the IBC, the Insurance Bureau of Canada, which acts as a sort of representation umbrella for the insurance industry, where we have raised consistently what we have heard as concerns from the community around the insurance process and what the challenges that people are facing, as well as other concerns around the debris removal program, for example. So we continue to meet with them and maintain those conversations to ensure that they're getting the feedback and they are aware of the challenges that Jasperites are facing.
Councillor Frechette.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and through to Director Sanders and Ms. Goldney. Through the application process and the entire recovery altogether, we've had the loss, of course, of residential properties, high density buildings, commercial buildings, and of course all the socioeconomic issues that go with all of those losses. Lately, we've had some business owners who feel that maybe there's been more emphasis placed on the social side of the recovery plan. Do you find any delays, unusual delays with the commercial side, be it staff accommodation issues or permitting issues? Is there any discrepancies there, or are we on a fairly level playing field there?
Yeah, so if you look at the rebuild permit map that Director Sanders pulled up in our presentation, I think you can see that quite a few commercial businesses, along with quite a few residential properties, have received their permits, and rebuilding is well underway. So they're reviewed by the same team in the same time frame, and we review the applications as and when they come in. There are some additional complexities with reviewing a commercial application, such as ensuring that the proposed building conforms to the commercial floor allocation for the property. So there have been some additional timeframes where there's been some work needed to be done to verify that conformance. But overall, they're reviewed at the same time by the same team through the same process. And I think the map demonstrates that permits have been issued for both.
Okay, thank you for that, Terry. I just don't know that, obviously this is a complex time. We've got a lot of balls in the air with the needs of people who've lost their homes, and of course, people who've lost their homes and their businesses, etc. I was just appreciate your clarity on the process. I'm not familiar with what's involved with permitting, but certainly as a council, we would certainly not lean towards one group or the other. I mean, we all have to recover collectively. Thank you.
Mayor Ireland, through you to Councillor Frechette, I'll also reiterate that on January 20th, when there's the next JRCC update to you, today the deep dive is about rebuild. The deep dive on January 20th is about economic recovery. So it'll be a particular focus on the economy and the business community. So just want to reinforce that.
Okay, that's great. I think there'll be a lot of interest, certainly from our business community, to see what the future looks like in terms of the focus going forward. Thank you very much, Director Sanders.
Councillor Dunn.
Councillor Ireland, and to you to either Director Sanders, possibly Director Clark. We talked about 66 buildings in process, but that's not 66 residences. There's an apartment building that's included in that count, which is one building permit. There's at least another building permit, may cover two buildings at the same time for 8 units. So while we're talking about 100 units or close to 100 units in recovery, it actually represents a significant number of more households that are going to be able to be accommodated based on what we were trying to do there during 2025.
I'm so excited you asked that question, because I think there's some good numbers to share with council today. So as of December 16th, we've issued 101 properties with a building permit for rebuilding. And this includes permits for 223 dwelling units, which represents 165 replacement units and 58 net new units. So I think they're really encouraging numbers and pointing to a positive future.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the additional clarity.
At the moment, I see no other hands, so I have some questions. I want to begin firstly with thanks, Ms. Goldney, for attending. As Director Sanders said, it has been quite some time since we had Parks Canada representative present to council, and I can understand why in the past there may have been some hesitation. So I hope that you are comfortable here, and that might include you or some of your colleagues to come back, because we really do appreciate hearing from you about these matters. I have a number of questions, and if any of them lead to any level of discomfort, I encourage you just to respond beyond my scope, and I will drop it. I am interested in a number of the graphs, and it seems to me, without having done the actual map, and you may have alluded to this fact that other projects, that is not rebuild projects, have increased since the fire. Do you have a sense of why that is? Is it connected in any way to the fire, so that because other properties suffered losses, those that exist see this as an opportune time to expand or renovate them? Maybe, are they connected in some way, the increase in other projects in addition to, of course, the necessity of rebuild projects?
The main connection that comes to mind immediately is we've seen quite a few applications from residents primarily, but also from some commercial leaseholders looking to retrofit their structures to adhere to fire smart guidelines or best practices. We've certainly seen an uptick in applications for siding replacements or roof replacements to change the materials to those that are more fire resilient. So that's the main one that comes to mind.
Okay, I appreciate that. Is there a way to overlay the line graph with the bar graphs? So we see a diminishment, particularly in the green line for complete and conforming. But I would find it interesting to see whether it is like where the rebuild projects end up on the line graph as compared to other projects, which might be, it might be educational. I don't know whether it would be or not, but I'm interested. Is that a possibility? I'm not trying to create work for you, but has anybody looked at that?
Oh, it's certainly a possibility. The technology is there. But just as a point of clarification, the timelines that we displayed on our graph with the red and the yellow and the green were for all projects.
Right.
So is your interest in seeing those timelines separated out for rebuild versus non-rebuild projects? Just seeking to understand what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm just interested, specific to rebuild, whether the same line graph applies. And I think my final question for you, you mentioned that Parks Canada, and I think this is nationwide, has added 17 people to the process. Two questions on that. Firstly, can you advise how that is funded, where the funding is coming from? And secondly, whether that is sustainable and for how long? So we heard from Director Fart, for example, that it's going to take several years at least to get through the rebuild. Can we anticipate that Parks Canada will continue to have those 17 extra bodies available, and for how long, and at what cost? Because, I mean, certainly we do appreciate it, and that undoubtedly has affected that line graph that we just talked about. But 17 individuals, I think, spread across the country helping out. How long can we anticipate that we will get that level of support?
Yeah, so I'll have to get back to you with more details, but they are all term positions that have been hired to support recovery, and very grateful that we were able to get the funding to support those positions. I think it's made significant material difference for our communities rebuilt, but we'll have to get back to you with information on those other questions.
That's fair enough. And you could have said beyond scope, but that's all right. But I share the appreciation. It is important for our rebuild that we have that support, but it's also important that people in the community understand that there are Parks Canada personnel across the country who are assisting that we may never see. We don't see their crammed offices. We only see the local ones, but it is appreciated, but it comes at an expense, and we recognize that. So thank you for that. My final question will be for Director Sanders. And again, you can't say beyond scope, but you might say you'd have to come back. on the graph, and now I've lost the number, but 354 families or something, and 600 and some people. Whatever those numbers are, you might remember them.
Was three
300
in the interim housing, so 401 units, 354 households. 676 individuals in the 401 interim housing units.
So we understood early on that we lost a total of, I think it was 820 living units. Do we have any idea yet how many people that represented? And how many might have been accommodated either through interim housing or other avenues? What I'm interested in is, these are great numbers, 354 families accommodated. So in interim housing, we've been able to find space for 676 individuals. It's exceptional. But where does it stand in the overall need? Do we have any way to measure that?
Mayor Ireland, this is a wonderful segue to the next item on the agenda where I'm providing the director's report. But the short answer to your question is on January 27th, our housing manager, Leanne Pelche, will be back in front of council with an update on the housing action plan. And part of that picture is to look at all of these different moving pieces of numbers and numbers of residents looking for housing, in housing, and getting ready to do another housing needs assessment, a quick one, so we can answer those questions. And Ms. Pelche will explain that further on January 27th, but that's upcoming work that have our eyes on.
All right, thank you for that. Are there any other questions for Director Sanders or Ms. Goldney? I see no hands, so again, I will thank you both and Director Park for your contributions. And I would look for a motion from a councillor to receive the report for information. Deputy Mayor Waxer, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And as Director Sanders just said, that gives us an opportunity to segue into agenda item 6.2, the director's report for urban design and standards. So Director Sanders.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. For new council members, this is a bit of a routine and a pattern that we have at the municipality, which is every 3 months, but also every council meeting for you, one of the directors provides you with a synopsis of the work that we've been doing in the 3 months previous and a little indicator of what's coming next. So I'm first up here on January 6th, and then my colleagues will follow after me, and then you'll see me again in about another 3 months. So you have a one-pager in your agenda package with some highlights of the activities. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm just going to speak to a few things there. In the Urban Design and Standards Department, for this particular update, I'm focusing from July 1st to December 15th when this was written. And just to flag for you what some of the work has been that we've been up to over the course of the last 6 months. So major projects, when we're thinking about town planning and how we need to be thinking about our community as we're making a whole bunch of decisions in the short term for the longer term. We've been working quite closely with our parks colleagues on a number of land use policy amendments related to housing. For returning councillors and others, you may remember that was the engagement we did in April, May, and June. And then you passed a series of resolutions with 12 recommendations to parks. So we've been working behind the scenes on that, and also starting to work with our operations colleagues on a transportation master plan and to how to integrate that with land use and community planning. So that's been some thinking we've been doing to set ourselves up for success. On the development coordination front, we now have and are testing an e-permitting software platform that we've been working with the town of Banff to create. We're using their their brains on this. We also finalized the utility access agreement in Cabin Creek. And big project for us has been the street and public space use permitting review process that our department assumed, and it's also been super busy because of rebuild. So that's been keeping us hopping. On the housing front, the housing action plan will be back in front of you for an update on January 27th. Leanne Peltier, our housing manager, will have that in front of you. And as of December 15th, there were 69 applications received for the accessory dwelling unit program, and 35 signed funding and agreements had been set up for folks. So just a reminder to council that those were the $30,000 grant for a brand new accessory dwelling unit, or 10,000 for a retrofit. So that was one of the programs through the HAF funding that we received. And one of the projects that Ms. Peltier is working on is an accessory dwelling unit design catalog, so people can have access free of charge to designs to build an accessory dwelling unit. And there's some other activities that Ms. Peltier is going to be in front of you later this month to set you up with success when it comes to the housing front. I do want to flag that as of December 11th, our net new dwelling units in town, this is dating back to December 18th, 2024 is when the clock starts ticking for HAF funding. We had 192 net new dwelling units in the whole town, and 58 of those are related to rebuild. So some of those changes to the land use policy that we made back in October 2024 are having some material changes. And the last thing on the housing side of things that I'd like to advise is next week at Committee of the Whole, Ms. Peltier will be in front of you with an update on the Connaught below market housing project. So that's the JMHC housing project that's underway on Connaught right now. Leanne will be here with an update for you. And on the energy and environment side of things, the Climate Adaptation Action Plan was approved by Council in July. And there's a whole series of steps that are now unfolding to choose priorities and figure out how those priorities can slide into capital projects over the next number of years, and also look for funding for some of those capital projects. And then last, the Clean Energy Improvement Program launched in November. So those are low interest loans for residents who want to do some retrofit work to the buildings. And Mona El Dabi, our energy and environment manager, negotiated with AB Munis for that program. It was a bit of a mind bender for them, but to make it available for people who are rebuilding. So that was a nice accomplishment for Ms. El Dabi. And no staffing changes in the Urban Design and Standards Department. And we've been busy, and lots of communications and engagement activity also over the course of the last 6 months. And I think probably one of the more rewarding things is one of our team members, Marley Pollock, has been regularly doing the navigating rebuild module in the Pathfinders program that he's been finding quite rewarding, and has been an important part of helping the Pathfinders in the community support people with the rebuild stuff. So I will leave it there, Mayor Ireland, and I'm open to any questions, of course.
Thank you again, Director Sanders. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and thank you for your report, Director Sanders. I have a question around the net new dwelling units. So 192 net new, 58 are associated with rebuild. So that leaves like 134 or so. Can you just explain what the other 134 of those homes that still survived the fire that are adding new units?
Yes, through you, Mayor Ireland, to Councillor Hall, it's a variety of things. So the Connaught bill, for example, is one. The trigger for counting for HAF funding is that it receives a building permit. So there are 2 apartment buildings. There is the rebuild of an apartment building that has an extra 9 units in it. So there's 9 net new. There are a couple of instances where people are rebuilding, but they're building with more units. And then there are a couple of instances where it's basically infill redevelopment, where a home has been demolished, not by fire, and is being rebuilt with additional units. And then it would be whatever the new number is minus, for example, the one that came down, and then that would be the net new. So it's quite a variety of things actually across town.
Okay, that makes sense. I was a bit confused in that, but that makes sense with the apartment buildings that are going up. And there is this conversation in town that we're gonna have too much housing in a few years. And I wonder if you can speak to that, because I don't think that is actually a thing, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm curious too, with the 58 net new dwelling units associated with rebuilds, I just wonder how many of those homes already had a secondary suite that wasn't legal or wasn't recorded or wasn't, you know, I don't know if there's any way to track that, but you know, I know a lot of homes in Cabin Creek had extra suites that probably weren't considered suites, or
Yes, through you, Mayor Ireland, to Councillor Hall, I don't believe we have a means to identify if there was a not permitted suite that is now becoming a legal suite. We're just thrilled to have legal suites. One of the reasons I'm thrilled that we have legal suites is then it means that safety code requirements are met, et cetera. So if something happens in the building, people can get out, for example, that those people there's a life safety issue. So I don't know that we have a means to figure that out, but at the end of the day, like the eye on the prize is we have legal suites and we have more of them. So to your question about could we have too much housing? There's a lot of moving pieces. This is one of the reasons why our housing manager, Leanne Pelche, is going to take some time and do a quick housing needs assessment. There are people who have left town that may or may not be coming back. There are all kinds of seasonal workers that are arriving. There are all sorts of moving pieces. This is all information you folks all know. But I do know that had we not had the fire, we had a 0% vacancy rate. And a 2% vacancy rate is really tough for a community. And we had 0, and we've had 0 for a long time. So if we can get to 2%, if we could get to 3 and 4, that would be kind of normal, and it probably will feel weird, but it will be normal. And then much higher than that would be, I think, honestly, a challenge for us to achieve. I say that, and economic conditions in the world, the province, the country could change, and we don't have control over that. But what we do want to do is monitor and make sure we have an understanding of what units we have. Do they meet the needs of residents that are here, residents that are coming and going, et cetera?
if I may, I just, you know, my observation when I drive around town, look around town, is that I don't see big multiplexes going up. I just see really tall houses going up. Like everything seems so much taller than it was. And I mean, you know, going to a 3 or 4% vacancy rate would be amazing. I remember back in the day moving to Jasper and getting the booster and going to the classifieds and calling up the numbers to find a place to live, and you find places to live back then. But that was 30 years ago. But yeah, the houses that I'm seeing just seem a lot taller, and that might be the extra suites, or just people are getting, you know, those big. Sorry, you know, it's all drink. Yeah, I wonder if those tall buildings are taller, adding more suites, or if they're just taller because they have, you know, vault ceilings and a loft up stairs kind of thing.
Yes, through you, your worship, to Councillor Hall. I know anecdotally that some buildings are taller, but I don't know if those are the ones that are under construction that we can see. I also know, like, one resident I had a great visit with felt like, oh my gosh, my new building is so big and so tall, and it looks strange because there's nothing next to it. And she also knew that it looked tall, but she knew the math and that it wasn't taller than what she had, or it was like marginally taller. So there's a bit of an optical illusion that I think is going to feel more familiar when there are more homes next to homes. It'll just feel quite different. And some are going to be a little bit taller. Yeah.
Other questions for Director Sanders? Councillor Melvin.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to you, to Director Sanders. I always like looking and seeing if I don't understand a term, and I see MDDL school and map tool. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit? It does have to learn about building gentle increases in density. MGDL is just a product name, I guess.
In a way, Mayor Ireland, through you to Councillor Melnick, I should probably not have put that line in there because now I'm gonna have to explain it. And Leanne Pelche will miss the splash later this month, but Middle School, so Middle is a company out of Calgary that we've engaged to support us with community conversations around gentle density increases in town. So they're gonna work with the municipality, they're also gonna work with residents and builders around how to have small increases in density, whether it's an accessory dwelling unit or just a few units on a property to support us so that we don't have to have any big changes to get some change in town when it comes to vacancy. So I'll send you some additional information because there's just the program is just getting set up, just almost to be launched, but I'll make sure that you get the information. The map tool, and again, our housing manager, Leanne Pelche, will have more expansive details for you at the end of the month when she's in front of you, but it's essentially a tool that someone could use to find their property on a map and then see what kind of density you could do on that property. So to facilitate residents' interpretation of land use policy and what you could do, so you don't have to go and read a policy. That's the gist of that.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the additional information and look forward to the next two sessions.
Are there any further questions for Director Sanders? It appears not, so thank you again for your second presentation of the day. And that might take you off the hook now. That takes us to, oh, I'm sorry.
Receive it for, make a motion.
Oh, yes, thank you.
I will make a motion to receive the director's report for information.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Paul. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Does any councillor wish to have a brief? Great, okay. It is about 8 minutes to 3. I'll call an 8-minute recess and we'll reconvene at 3 o'clock.
That's so good.
All right, it is 3:01. We are back in session and we are about to begin agenda item 6.3, supplementary assessment and tax bylaws. And I will look to administration and is it Director Melanchuk, are you presenting?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, some problems with the mic there. So as some of council might recall, every year we go through this process of approving the supplementary assessment and taxation of the supplementary as well. For those that are new, you will see it in coming years, every year around this time. So the recommendation today is that council give first and second reading to Bylaw 273, which is a supplementary assessment of improvements 2026, and that council give first and second reading to Bylaw 274, supplementary tax bylaw 2026. In the background, you can see around this time last year, we did the same thing for Bylaw 264 as well as 265, so those would be rescinded with these new bylaws coming into effect. So the biggest part of this is that there's two distinct components of municipal revenue process and assessment and taxation. Assessment is what the market value or regulated assessment class of a property is. And taxation applies the municipal tax rate to those values to generate the revenue for municipal services. So we just went through the whole budget process. We know how much money we need to collect for taxation, but this is an added component that adds equity to the process so that the properties that are being developed in a year are still giving to that tax process rather than not paying during that year. So there are two types of the tax regulated bylaws. So the regular assessment taxation bylaws, which applies to all properties as of December 31st of the previous year. So these passed in the prior spring. And then there's supplementary assessment taxation bylaws, which apply to the properties that are newly constructed, improved, or occupied during the current tax year. The supplementary assessment bylaw authorizes the assessor to value the newly completed or occupied buildings in the same tax year they become operational. Without supplementary assessments, property owners whose buildings are completed mid-year would not pay any municipal taxes on the improvements until the following year, despite receiving services and infrastructure support. So if a municipality chooses to conduct supplementary assessments, the Municipal Government Act requires that the passage of a corresponding supplementary tax bylaw also occur. This allows the municipality to apply the existing tax rate to the newly assessed values and issue supplementary tax notice for the remainder of the year. Just looking ahead, the municipality anticipates increased construction and redevelopment activity in 2026 because of the recovery and rebuilding efforts following the 2024 wildfire. As of December 8th, 2025, there were 61 properties that were in early stages of redevelopment in phase 3A of the application process. 32 properties that had approved building permits. So phase 3B building permits that were approved, and 59 properties were in active construction, which is phase 4 actual building. So it is reasonable to expect that many of these projects will reach completion and occupancy partway through the 2026 tax year. Supplementary assessment and taxation process ensures that these properties are assessed and taxed fairly for the time they are in use, aligning with the principles of equitable taxation. And below you can see there's a small table that goes through the year by year for the past 5 years of what we collected from 2021 to 2025 in supplementary taxation. And you'll note that in 2022 and 2023, there was some spikes there. 2022 was the development of the Forest Park development, along with others. That's just the major cause of the spike there. And in 2023, that was mainly due to, there was some pursuit as well as also Bear Hill properties, as well as the other one? Oh, there was the Aspen Gardens development. So I knew that was going to come up, so I thought I would dive in and look at those again and reconfirm in my head. But those were the properties that came online and gave additional supplementary taxation for those years. And what you will see attached is Bylaw 273 and 274, which are the new supplementary assessments and supplementary tax bylaw for 2026. I'm available for any questions, should there be any. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Melanchuk. Are there questions? Well, in the absence of others, I have a couple, and I can't believe that it's taken this many years for me to think of these questions. In the supplemental assessment bylaw, is there a difference between 3.1.1, 3.1.2, and 3.1.3 as to when the assessment and thus the tax is applicable So is it possible, and I'm thinking particularly now that we're into all these rebuilds, that a building could be said to be completed and yet not have an occupancy permit? And those first two, are they intended to be conjunctive or disjunctive? The or that separates the other one, that makes sense. I mean, if you get a modular brought in, that's what that covers. But could we possibly run into a situation where a resident could say, well, yes, my house looks to be completed, but Parks Canada won't issue me an occupancy permit because the landscaping isn't at the right level?
Mayor Island first, maybe I'll respond a little bit. I believe that these are terms that are drawn directly from the MGA, and so under legislation, we most likely have drawn these definitions specifically. This bylaw is intended to enable the assessor to do these things. We propose in the bylaw to enable the assessor to do everything that's allowed under the MGA, under the Municipal Government Act, and so I believe we've probably just drawn those specific terms directly from the Act. So I don't know that I can speak to, if there's a scenario where one or the other might not apply. But I believe that, again, administration is likely drawn them to be legislatively compliant with what the provincial government rules are. And so our bylaws model probably have best practice from the Act and from the families.
All right, and I mean, I can accept that, and maybe it will not arise, and we don't want a situation where a property is completed and somebody chooses not to occupy it so they don't have to pay taxes. But on the other hand, we don't want the converse either. But when we relate this then to the supplementary tax bylaw, the question is, at what points does the tax apply? So if you finish your building and occupy it in October, you would vote for the last 2.5 or 3 months of the year. Fair enough. Technically, again, I must have overlooked this in other years. 3.1 of the supplementary tax bylaw refers to a levy on properties listed on the supplemental tax roll. That it's the supplemental assessment roll that we're talking about. Because then we get to levy on the supplemental assessment that comes from the previous bylaw. So again, I wonder whether that wording should be changed in 3.1 to say that all properties listed on the supplementary assessment roll established under the other bylaw, then we can levy a tax on that, because there isn't a supplemental tax roll.
Mayor Allen, I think administration would be happy to take that comment away and just check for consistency with previous bylaws. So while the volume of properties that this might apply to will be vastly different during rebuilding than has ever happened before, this is not a new process for the municipality. So if this was the same wording that we had last year and the year before and the year before that, the year before that, then likely it legislatively is correct. It's completely possible that there's a typo or something that we missed. We can take that away before third reading and identify if any change needed to be made there, rather than trying to do it off the cuff today, but we can certainly have a look and see. But again, this is consistent with past practice in the municipality. Although the volumes will change, there are going to be more houses constructed and completed mid-year than we've seen before. The process that we're proposing and the bylaws that we're proposing are consistent with what we've done in the past.
Sure. Absolutely agree that my level of review is different too, given the circumstances. Even though we have passed a supplementary assessment and supplementary tax bylaw every year that I've been here, I've looked at it differently this year. But I'm content with that. Thank you. Any other questions? Oops, sorry. Any other questions, Councillor Holland?
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. My question, I know that it says property owners whose buildings are completed mid-year, like myself, you're not charged until the next year. Is it one lump sum or is it spread out or just included, or is it just added to the taxes of the next year?
Your worship through to Councillor Hall. It goes out, and it's prorated as to the amount of time. And if they're set up, there is a choice on how they wish to pay that.
Thank you very much, as this has never would have affected me ever, and now it does. I'm just curious. Thank you.
Councillor Frechette.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and to Director Sanchak. How often do we do these supplementary assessments? I mean, we're gonna have, for example, if an assessor comes, does he come to do a period of time, or does he come to a period of a completed occupancy permits? How does that go? I mean, it's foreseeable that we would have houses being occupied weekly, monthly, etc.
Your worship, through to Councillor Frechette. We just received the supplementary for the 2025 year. So then it was applied, and all those properties were then prorated as to the amount of time that they would have spent in that property with occupying it or the usage of that property.
So, in other words, if the assessor if you're in your property for 5 months and the assessor doesn't come till later, 6 months, then it's just prorated backwards to account, but it has to be done within that tax year.
It's prorated to the occupancy or the usage of the property, and because it's given in, I believe we got it in December, at the end of December. So he often comes by and will see all the properties in the course of the year. It's not like he just comes at the end of the year, but he also reviews all the dates of the permits and when they're signed off and whatnot. So it's all done with viewing as well as reviewing the documentation on when those properties got their final occupancy permits and whatnot.
So the assessment is based on the occupancy date.
Right.
Thank you.
Or the use, sorry, of the permit, yeah, occupancy permit, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Melnick and then Deputy Mayor Watson.
Thank you, Worship, and I'm going to refer back to a previous presentation today where there are a number of development permits that were issued. So it's not necessarily a new property per se that will be the additional tax assessed. It would be if improvements were made in the property, which increase the value of the home, such as adding an additional dwelling unit or extensive work outside decks and so on. So there will be a lot of work this year, and I'm sure the assessor is going to be wanting to do much more sooner rather than later, just to keep up with the volume.
Deputy Mayor Waxer.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and through you to Director Malinchuk. I was just curious, given the way insurance seems to have worked where landscaping is negotiated after the fact, and so that many homes will just be sitting in a gravel pit, will there be incremental increases each year as the house becomes more valuable once it has grass and pathways and things like that?
Mayor Ireland for Councillor Waxer. So I think yes, the answer to that is yes. As you know, the regular process is that as improvements are made to a property that affect its market value, the assessor regularly assesses that. And then makes changes to the market value of the property on the municipality's tax rolls, assessment roll accordingly. So two properties side by side, one that updates its exterior with new finishings and adds a new deck and maybe expands a little bit. The assessor will see those improvements or does new landscaping and say, oh, property in this condition should sell for this much more than it would have last year without the improvements. And so that's a regular thing that happens. I suppose in the context of the reconstruction, there'll be homes that will be built with no landscaping, and then maybe the subsequent season, the landscaping would come on. It's possible that would affect the market values. We might pay more for a house with finished landscaping than one without, and that likely would be reflected. That's again a regular process that happens not just in Jasper historically, but also in municipalities where new subdivisions and neighborhoods are being built regularly, where you might buy a house that doesn't have a deck or a fence or landscaping, and you might do that to the homeowner at some point in the future. That would be reflected in the value of your property down the road when you make those changes.
If there are no other questions for administration, I would look for a motion to give first reading to bylaw number 273. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would make the motion that council read for the first time bylaw 273, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to authorize a supplementary assessment of improvements for the taxation year 2026.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Melnick. Is there any debate? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And I would look then for a motion to give second reading to bylaw number 273. Deputy Mayor Waxer.
Council read for the second time bylaw number 273, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to authorize the supplementary assessment of improvements for the taxation year 2026.
Thank you for that motion, Deputy Mayor Waxer. In the absence of any indication of debate, I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And similarly, then I would look for our councillor to make a motion for first reading of bylaw number 274. Councillor Frechette.
Make the motion that council read for the first time bylaw number 274, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to authorize the imposition of supplementary tax for the taxation year 2026.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Frechette. See no hands for debate. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And finally, then I would look for a motion to give second reading to bylaw number 274. Go ahead, Councillor Frechette.
Make the motion that council read for the second time bylaw number 274, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to authorize the imposition of supplementary tax for the taxation year 2026.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Frechette. Call the question. All those in favor? Again, there are none opposed. That motion is carried. And that takes us to agenda item 6.4, utility fees, levy and collection bylaw 2026. And is that you again, Director, CAO Given? Yours?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor Island. I just thought I would chime in to say that if council wishes to talk about any of the underlying principles of the bylaw or the utility rate structure, the administration is happy to chat about that. Director Malinchuk and Director Donaldson will focus on the utility rate bylaw for 2026. the rates that are there and any questions that you might have. But if we want to talk about principles, I'm happy to have that discussion. I would just note that it was a number of discussions to arrive at the triple C model. So appreciate the council heard from the Chamber of Commerce about that today. There may be more than we could answer in a brief afternoon here, but I'm happy to answer any questions on the principal side of it. And Directors Malinchuk and Donaldson will handle the details of the proposed 2026 bylaw.
Thank you for that, CAO Given. Go ahead, Director Malinchuk. Or Director Donaldson. Malinchuk, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so today, administration comes to council, with a recommendation that council give first and second reading to bylaw 275, the utility fees levy and collection bylaw 2026. In the approved 2026 budget, total utility expenses are $8,392,815. Of this amount, $7,274,042 will be collected from levies, and the remaining amounts are collected by bulk sales or dumping. During the discussions, there is below a summary level of what affected the levies for the increases from 2025 to 2026. I won't go through those in detail, but I'm sure everybody's had a chance to read over those. In order to give proper notice and advertisement of change, administration would require the third reading before the mail-out date of February 5th, 2026. The proposed rates for 2026 and their impact on the customers are presented on page 33 of the PDF in the council agenda. And there's a lot of figures there, but just to give a high-level summary, if a residential property that had a connection that was smaller than 1 inch, and for the water meter, and going through the possibility that they were on a tier 1 using 20 average cubic meters of water in the 2-month billing period, they would be looking at an increase annually of $95. So that's $8 a month, but we do bi-monthly billing, so $16. That's assuming that they're using that $20 cubic meter amount of water. If they use less, it's less. If they use more, it's more. And then for the commercial side, looking at, say, they were using the highest volume that's represented in the table of using 1,543 cubic meters, they would be looking at overall an increase of $3,000 annually, which is $250 a month. So, and that's again based on them having 1 meter that's greater than 1.5 inches. So just to give that high level, that includes the garbage and recycling as well. So that's the high level numbers that we might be looking at. Those numbers, those figures that we've been using in the table were put together based on average use of residential, small and large commercial properties back in 2020 and 2021 when we were conducting the studies of what they would be using as an average, just to look at what people might be looking at for their changes going forward every year. So those are what the consumer was using at that point in time. So the bylaw remains the same, except just some changes of dates and whatnot. And then the major change is in Schedule A, and that's all the fees that you'll see that are attached to Schedule A in the bylaw. There are a few new line items that I thought I would highlight. There is a new one for garbage, and that's municipal bin rental. So this does not include any monthly fees or tipping, and it's a $300 per billing charge. And then there's an out-of-town commercial recycling fees that have been added on there as well. So to note, there was a standard recyclable material at 50 cents per kilogram, all plastics at 35 cents per kilogram, And account setup, a one-time administration fee, which is $50, the same as any of the other account fees that are set up. And I know that Director Donaldson may be able to speak more about the ERP process with recycling and the amounts that we're charging in 2026 and whatnot. Should there be any questions, I didn't include anything in the actual RFD because it's just going forward as a suit. But just wanted to highlight that there were some additional line items on that schedule so that there was no confusion there. Otherwise, both of us are here to answer any questions, should there be any. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Malinchuk. I turn to councillors for questions they may have. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. And, you know, as we toured the water plant this morning and the wastewater treatment plant, it's all fresh in our minds, but can you remind me what the debenture was for? Again, that $120,000 payment, was that the centrifuge, salad spinner? I just can't remember, just read for the benefit of new council. And myself, because I forget.
Your worship, through to Councillor Hall. So there were debentures taken and will be taken out, and it's all for wastewater treatment plant rehab. That building is over its amount of years, and we're replacing all of the assets within the contents of the building. So yes, the centrifuge is in part and parcel of that.
CAO given.
Yeah, Mayor Ireland, we can maybe have a little bit of a look about what portion of these projects was debenture funded versus grant funded. I know that we did see grants for a lot of projects recently over the last couple of years. We didn't receive full funding or 100% funding for all the projects that we undertook. But the centrifuge, the salad spinner or the poop spinner that we saw this morning was a $2.3 million project. Again, I know that we did go for grant funding for that. I don't believe we achieved 100% grant funding. And so that's an example. Another one was UV filtration as another project that we took the last couple of years. And I think going off memory, that may have been about an $800,000 project, which again was partially grant funded, but a couple of these smaller examples, a couple of examples of the types of capital that is ongoing at the facility. As Director Malinchuk mentioned, as you all saw today, 2004, I think, was commissioning of the plant at kickoff. And so we are on that 20-year mark where not only is the equipment at its useful lifespan in lots of spots, but also provincial regulations continue to change and update. So things like UV filtration was not an item that was required or really even conceived when the plant was built. And it is a requirement that a municipality has to meet for a class 4 plant like we have today. So some of those are life cycle replacement, and some of the capital needs are driven by changing regulatory requirements. But again, I can't speak to the specifics of exactly which portions were for which.
If I may, when the province changes regulation, is there typically a grant that might go along with it if the municipality just doesn't have the 8 million or 2 million or the however much these things cost?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Ireland, through you to Councillor Hall. Yeah, yes and no, I guess would be the best answer. So for example, our lagoon equalization project, for example, that was a regulatory requirement. There were grants available, but we did have to seek those out, and they don't cover 100%, not even half. I think the one from the provincial government covers 40%. There was the option for some federal funding, which we have applied for. Still waiting to hear back. And that does allow us to grant staff that would cover the majority of the cost if we were successful in that. But there are usually options, just not always guaranteed, and we have to reach out to multiple levels of government to cover some of these costs because they're substantial when it involves wastewater treatment.
I think it was really beneficial for council to tour those facilities today and just actually see how complex they are. And yeah.
I just want to pick up for a moment on some of the information we learned this morning. Those councillors who were able to take a tour of the wastewater treatment facility and other facilities this morning. One of the pieces of information we received was that if the influent had less water in it, that is more concentrated, it would in fact be an easier process to treat it. And so one of the goals of the CCC model that we implemented a few years ago is to promote water conservation, particularly by big users. And hence we have a tiered rate. Have we any evidence that the model and the tiering has in fact decreased consumption to any noticeable extent?
Your worship, we have not looked at it this year. However, we have looked at it in previous years. Some did go down, some went up. So it really wasn't a telltale, sign of any real impact. But whether or not some properties might have put in some ways of lessening the amount of water that might have occurred, but we don't know that for sure. They could have been putting some things on their water, their taps or their showers or whatnot, but we're not completely, we wouldn't have that data.
Sure. And whether or not it went down, it may have gone up had they not taken steps, and we will never know.
Right.
Okay. CA will give it.
Well, Mayor Ireland, one thing that, again, going from memory that we had noticed was under the CCC model, because there are some portions of the billing that are related to the service lines or service size. We did see some explicit examples of properties where a property owner looked at their service size, where it was where the property had a larger than required service. So the line coming in was larger than the property actually needed under built-in code or any other sort of use. And the owner chose to downsize their service lines. And that's completely reasonable under the billing model. And so they have that ability to, in some cases, property owners have an ability to reduce their costs by saying this use that we have in this building either doesn't require two different service lines, which we had some examples of that, where a property owner said, oh, I'm going to go to a single service line, or I don't need to have this large a service coming into my property. I'm going to go down size. And so there are some ways where they had an ability to impact their costs, to reduce their costs under the CCC model, but it wasn't on the consumption side necessarily. It was actually on the capital charge side, the connection charge side.
Thank you for that, and I will let Director Donaldson respond, and then I'll turn to you, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The utility manager, Mr. Michaud, did share earlier today, actually, that consumption overall has gone down year over year due to things like, low flow fixtures and improvements that people have made. So from an overall trend, yes. So that just with retrofits occurring, we could draw the conclusion or assumption too that the CCC model does play into that as well. But you did share that information.
Thank you very much for that information. So that means then less water to pump, less water to treat again after it's gone through household or commercial use. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, your worship, and through you, I have a question. Specifically in the sewer levies explanation of rates will rise by 4.4%, and there's a number of different numbers explaining transfers to and from, but one number caught my eye. And that was a reduction in contract operating costs of over $230,000. Is that a one-time saving that we'll see next year, or is that something that will continue to, I'm not going to say subsidize, but help to keep sewer levies down?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to Councillor Melnick. I had the same question when I saw that there too, and I'm like, oh, somebody's definitely going to ask a question about this. The truth is we don't know. We can't forecast out past this year with the numbers that we are provided from our contracted service provider. It will be a potential savings. With that said, we still need to take into consideration that there could be unforeseen costs that do arise due to unforeseen expenditures, just due to the age of the wastewater treatment plant. So I don't want people to get their hopes up that, you know, overall, this is something that we can rely on to reduce costs. However, it is, you know, positive looking at it in that regard. You know, if everything goes to plan and that we don't have any unplanned expenses or things like that.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation. I appreciate that it's going to be hard to predict what's going to happen next year as well. So, but thank you for clarifying that that particular number.
Thank you for that. Councillor Roger, were you attempting to get my attention there or just stretching? If I can read lips. Sorry, you appear to have been muted, but.
Am I muted now?
Nope.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, no question, stretching.
All right, thank you. I then had a question for Director Malinchuk, and it's just in the RFD, the background section. Under water levies, there's a reference to transfers to reserves under solid waste, transfer to reserves under recycling, higher transfers to reserves under sewer levies, increased transfers to restricted funds. Why the change of wording? Does it mean anything?
Your worship, sorry, it does not mean a thing. They all mean the same thing. And it's just because I'll talk about, I'll use a reference of reserves or restricted reserves or whatnot. It's just, they have been called different things over the past. So that's probably where it comes from and coming out of my brain. So I'll try to make the language more concise for next time.
And in each case, then, the transfers to reserves or restricted funds, is that all intended for capital replacement? Or is any part of that a reserve for operational funding?
Your worship, that is for capital.
Thank you. Any other questions for administration, Councillor Hall?
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. So during delegations, when Mr. Butler was here, I'm curious if we went to straight consumption, how much extra we'd have to charge on top of what people are consuming to make sure we have enough to save for projects and to save for infrastructure. That's a very big question. You probably have no idea, but I just, you know, yeah.
Mayor Ireland for Council Hall. So yeah, this does get into the principal side of things, and I don't know that we've recently done that math. I know that we had in a sort of previous review when we were going through the workshops to look at the model. And so we could have a look and maybe take some of that up from past years. What I can say is that in 2021, the water rate, so there's only single per cubic meter rate for water, and it's per cubic meter rate for sewer. In 2021, the water rate was $1.41 per cubic meter for water. Our lowest tier rate, which is probably what a lot of households would pay, is now 83 cents per cubic meter for water, and $2.35 for sewer. And in 2021, the sewer rate was $2.58. So both of those rates at the lowest tier, just so I'll be clear, at the lowest tier, both those rates are significantly lower than they would have been paying back in 2021. On the upper tiers, at the highest tier of consumption for water, it's proposed to be $1.34. So again, it's still lower per cubic meter of water in 2026 proposed than it was in 2021. On the other hand, on the sewer side, the per cubic meter consumption charge for sewer is proposed to be $4.05 per cubic meter. So that is quite a bit higher than it was in 2021. And this is a recognition that, as you saw today, the treatment of the water coming into people's homes is pretty easy here in Jasper. You get fresh, clean water, and we hit it with a little bit of chlorine and send it down the pipes. On the other hand, you saw the capital investment required on the sewer side to treat the water before it goes out into the Athabasca River. And the difference in rates between sewer and water, is a reflection of the fact that we have more capital costs on that sewer side. So if we wanted to combine the capital charge, there's a separate item, and the connection charge, which is a separate item, and roll those all in to the per cubic meter rates for water and sewer, they would be substantially higher than they are now, and likely would be higher than they were in 2021, because the municipalities recognize that we need to put more money into our capital, particularly on the sewer side, than we had been in the past. A couple of brief thoughts about the CCC model. One of the challenges that we discussed under a pure consumption-based model, that introduces a really high degree of variability of ups and downs into your revenue. In the summer, when people are consuming lots of water, there's a lot of traffic in town, and the municipality sees a lot of revenue. In winter, the revenue drops off. That makes it difficult to plan for when we have these large costs that we foresee and that we have to know that we have enough money to be able to do. That revenue variability makes it really difficult to plan. And the other part about the system that we have built in is a recognition that if you have a larger pipe coming into your property or multiple pipes coming into your property, that means that there's a higher potential peak demand. So, if your pipe is double the diameter of somebody else's pipe, even though you might not be using as much water today, means that theoretically we have to have a system that's ready to supply you and your larger pipe should you call on. And so, the idea of equity and the relationship between service line size and meter size to charges, there's a rationale to that. Anybody could debate whether that's a good rationale or a good idea or a bad idea, but there is at least theory behind why the municipality might charge more for a larger pipe, because it means that even if somebody isn't consuming as much water, we have to make sure that we have a system that's ready to supply that much water or to treat that much effluent when it comes up.
Councillor Hall?
Thank you very much. So to that, if that property owner decided or realized they didn't need that size of pipe, they could swap it out. But if they do need it, that's okay.
That's exactly right. And as I said before, we have some instances where there were property owners that realized that they had two service lines coming in. They said, well, there's no technical reason or fire code reason that we have two service lines, or that we have a particularly large service coming in. And we've seen a handful of instances where people recognize that and chose to sort of replumb their properties. So they were able to reduce their costs. That's right.
So, and I wish I'd asked this while he was still here, but the comment around equity with apartment buildings and homes, is it just because the pipe going into an apartment building is quite a bit larger than the pipe going into a home? Would that big pipe then spread out to a bunch of little pipes to all the apartments? I didn't quite understand that, and I'm just wondering if there's an explanation or.
I don't know that I would sort of comment on the math that somebody else is doing. You know, what we have seen in the past is people take the total amount of a bill and divide it across the number of beds, for example, and that's not exactly right, you know, and it's challenging for the municipality because we don't have a bed tax or a per bed utility bill. And so we have to figure out a basis that we can rationally bill customers on. And consumption is one of those. The volume of water that comes into a property and the volume of effluent that we imagine goes out. Or the pipe size. Those are two knowable things that we can measure and that we can sort of see on the public property side, right? Once it gets into the private property side, we can't really see those stats. I do also know that we had a lot of discussion about whether the model was equitable, comparing individual homes and apartment buildings. And I would say that the matter of equity, whether it is between residential properties and commercial properties, or between two different types of residential properties, or a residential property with a PHA and one without, is probably in the eye of the beholder. And depends on which side of that equation you're on. If you're a commercial property with a large service line, and you're carrying a large utility bill, you might think that's inequitable. Where somebody in a small residential property that doesn't consume a lot of water, you might think that it's perfectly fine. This is one of those issues where there is a bill that needs to be paid to maintain the assets that we have and to pay the operational costs. And it really is up to council to decide how you want to shift that burden to which portion of our customer base we want to go through. And that conversation took months and months and months before we landed on the triple C model.
On the issue of principle, CAO given. There were comments as we heard about inequity in the system, and yet when we went to this system, it was because it gave a hope of greater equity, we thought. Tiering seemed to be an issue. Tiering applies, as I understand it, only to the consumption portion of the triple C model. And the tiers work, I can't remember what the cutoff is, but the lowest tier is kind of what an average household would use. So one of the arguments perhaps that was made today, with Councillor Hall, I'm not sure that I fully grasp it, but the reference to apartments, would that be because each individual unit does not have a meter? So there's a meter for the apartment building. So it measures all of the water going, which takes it to a higher tier than if you had a single house, an R1. So in that sense, the argument that you pay more per unit of water in an apartment or in a hotel room makes some sense, because there's no way for us to identify the consumption by each of the individual units. Does that make sense? That's the way I understand it.
I could see that logic, sure.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the tiered rate seems to have had the desired effect of reducing consumption. Any other questions for administration? Councillor Hall?
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. I thought, like I said earlier, I found this morning's tour very beneficial. I'm wondering, in the spirit of engagement and education, has the municipality ever considered offering those tours to residents? I mean, I don't know logistics or if there'd be insurance, if they wear hard hats, but I've never been out there, and it's quite the plant, and it really did help me understand the complexity of the system.
Mayor Ireland, through you to Councillor Hall there. We could definitely offer something such as a virtual tour, I think, maybe more feasible, just considering all the safety regulations and liability that we'd likely encounter if we were to bring people out there. That's definitely an option. We'd be open to that.
In all the time you have, all the extra time you have.
All right, if there are no other questions, I just wanted to make one comment and not to the, what was Councillor Demota's expression? Disputator. But I just wanted to say in response to a comment you made, Diego, given that, yes, although we have a fairly simplified program for treating potable water. Our tour today did not give us the opportunity to look, say, at the wells, and so we have to get the water from an aquifer. We have to pump it up, as was confirmed by the operators. The pumping happens at the period of highest demand, when the electrical demand is also the highest. So we pay higher electricity costs to pump the water up to the reservoir. We have to maintain all those pipes. We have to maintain the system. We have to be compliant with the regulatory regime of the province. And yes, we add just a bit of chlorine and the water runs downhill, but it doesn't get to the reservoir for free either. So yes, it's a simplified system, but it's not without its attendant expenses, including a very large distribution system that is aging. And when we look at Calgary and a catastrophic failure, we should better understand the need to maintain reserves to replace our infrastructure, because it is incredibly damaging when there's a catastrophic failure. And Calgary has seen that now in successive years, and other communities I fear are going to face that. And so our rates have to include some capitalization amount one way or the other, because we know that we have to rebuild our system, and our industry would suffer drastically if we lost potable water to the community because of catastrophic failure of our water system. Deputy Mayor Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Bringing to CAO Gibbon. I remember being struck by the comment from a former director of operations about the fact that the capital, planning for the capital replacements, it was considered best practice that it happened, the self-funded through the fees, because of situations like Walkerton, and it takes the choices out of councillors' hands. We're just thinking about it in advance. And I believe that Mr. Butler this morning or earlier today referenced to taxation as being a more equitable system. And so I wondered, is it best practice, or is it, and what would most municipalities be doing, funding the capital costs for utilities through taxation or through utility fees?
Mayor Ireland, for Councillor Waxer, I certainly was encouraged to hear the chamber acknowledge that our property tax system is equitable and fair. I think that there is a challenge, exactly as you said, you know, as an elected official at the table when it comes to budget time. And there were two proposals, one for $1 million for a new outdoor skating rink and one for $1 million for a poop spinner. Which one, you know, is going to get your vote? I know all of you would make the right decision, but you can appreciate how those types of decisions can be challenging. And that's why the idea of the utility being self-funding and that its capital plan doesn't sort of compete with tax-funded capital priorities is a principle that I think a lot of municipalities follow. I wouldn't say that it's every municipality, but I think it's recognized as best practice because it is difficult. There are things that are a lot sexier than UV screeners for the wastewater treatment plants that probably would attract more public support and more public attention when it comes to budget time. And so this practice of saying, you know, we have a utility funded budget, we're going to collect enough money and seek grants and take the ventures when necessary to fund this core infrastructure that's required for this operation that's required all the time and needs to be operating. Sort of takes it out of that difficult situation that councils can be put in when you're sort of weighing off the relative merits of different capital items. So a tax funded item, the public can have opinions about where their taxes should go, you know, what things council should support with their taxes. It might be fair to say that the opinion about whether you need a new poop spinner is probably best left in the hands of the technical experts who make a recommendation rather than it being a political decision.
Final question for me, is there any requirement of notice to the public about this, or I understand that there is a degree of urgency because we want to get it out in the next billing cycle. But to be effective, is there a need to give notice of the change of rate to the public?
Yes, so your worship, there is. So we are required to give that notice. So that's why we put it in the November, December bill that goes out in February, so that it can be in effect for the January billing cycle that would come out in March. So it's advertised for the first 2 months, and then January, February's billing would come out in March, and that's when they would see the effective new rates.
All right. But the rates will be effective as of January 1st or on final passing of the bylaw?
No, your worship, it's January 1st for the new billing cycle. So it goes out as the notice in February is for November and December. So it's advertised as the new rates on that billing so that they can see the change. And then the next billing that they would get would be in March for January and February, and those rates would be effective for January 1st.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
If there are no further questions for administration, I would look for a motion for first reading. Is a councillor prepared for that? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I would make the motion that council read for the first time bylaw 275, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to provide for the levying and collection of fees for the provision of water, sewer, solid waste, and recycling services in 2026.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Hall. Is there any debate on the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, put in the sheet. Okay, one opposed. I would look for a motion then for second reading. Go ahead, Councillor Waxman. Deputy Mayor Waxman.
Thank you. Council read for the second time bylaw number 274, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to authorize the imposition. Oh, sorry, I went to the council read for the second time bylaw 275 being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to provide for the levying and collection of fees for the provision of water, sewer, solid waste and recycling services in 2026.
Thank you for that motion, Deputy Mayor Waxer. Is there any debate? And I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? There is one opposed. That motion carries. That takes us to agenda item 7, notices of motion, of which there have been none provided. So we go to agenda item 8, councillor reports. Are there any reports of councillors? Councillor Frechette.
Yes, I have a report from most enjoyable committee, I think I said, huh? The community and build. We met November 21st. Pardon me, December 22nd. We had a brief meeting at the ops building just to clear up some business from last year. And also we set out the guidelines and some of the members that we now have sitting on the new committee. We're waiting for appointments of at least one more position and hopefully a position from the Jasper Tourism group. We had some brief discussions about projects and hopefully getting a comprehensive working relationship with the provincial board and the federal board regarding this year's projects and guidelines. So hopefully in the new year we will get well underway, get our boots on the ground, and get our community intact, and look forward to putting together an enjoyable summer with the rest of the province. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Frechette. Any other reports? Councillor or Deputy Mayor Waxer?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I attended December 13th and 14th meetings, an orientation session for the Evergreens Foundation, and it was very valuable as a team building exercise, as well as building a comprehensive understanding of all that occurs in the decisions that we'll face in the upcoming years. That was very well executed, and we were introduced to met all of the staff members throughout the regions.
Thank you for that. Other reports? Councillor Roger.
Yes, Cable Conscrewed and I were at the December 18th, the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation meeting. And there's fairly good news. The project on Connaught Drive should be finished the first part of 2027. We were told probably in January, February, and it's on budget. And it appears that when you take all the mortgage payments and everything else together, we should make a profit every year. We estimate about $20,000 to $30,000. The other good news about it is thanks to Leanne Pelchy mainly. It's not going to cost the town a single dollar, this project. It's all grants and financing, and we're good to go without any money at all from the town. The second thing that happened there was that I, of course, was a member before, so I'm on as a board member, as a council member now. And Scott Wilson, who was before as a council member, is now as a member of the public until I believe the end of February, and then there'll be new members picked again from the public. So overall, it's a very good project, and it looks very successful. And there was some talk about perhaps going down the street a bit where Mr. Bowen's land is, if that's another thing to look at. It's not something that will be easy, but there may be other projects in town. And I think with the example that we've used so far with no financial assistance in the town, it's something that we could perhaps pattern ourselves again and do another one.
Thank you for that report. Good news indeed. And we join you in thanking Ms. Belche for her efforts. A really important project at no cost to the town. Any other reports? I will just take this opportunity then to report and to amplify Councillor Hall's earlier reference to the tours that we did. So yesterday and today, councillors had an opportunity to tour facilities and meet some of the staff. Yesterday it was community development and legislative and protective services primarily that we saw, and saw the not only the facilities but the staff, and sometimes staff working on top of each other to get the job done. Today we saw more of the same with operations and utilities. I mentioned this mostly, we've talked about the wastewater treatment plant visit and the reservoir visit, but we also visited operations, and of course snow removal is topical right now, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to credit the entire team in operations that's doing snow removal. What we found today is that in the few weeks of December where there was snow on the ground, there was a lot, and by December 28th, the team had already cleared and removed twice as much snow as they were required to remove all of last year. And by the end of today, because crews are out working today, by the end of today, they will have moved 3 times as much snow as all of last winter. Hundreds of truckloads going to the snow dump area on the Whistler Road. And so I appreciate that snow removal is topical and people are challenged with the condition of the roads, but it's not for want of work of our municipal staff. They have been out there, but they are faced with an incredible volume of snow, and they have been moving it by the truckload. And so credit to them. And of course, it was over the Christmas period, but I think we heard that they lost only 3 days of work: Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and New Year's Day, with respect to the staff who are entitled to have a break. So they've been working hard and doing the best they can. And I think from all appearances, the level of service being provided at Jasper is comparable, at least, or better than just about any other similar sized community. So I wanted to take this opportunity to thank directors for taking us on the tour, but thank the staff that we saw who are working so hard for the benefit of the community. If there are no further council reports, we will move to agenda item 9, upcoming events. With Jasper in January, it's about to start. Less than 2 weeks. There is a tourism advocacy summit in Edmonton, February 8th to 10th. For the last couple of years, we have attended that. CAO Gibbon has just indicated that 3 spots are reserved for that. I would expect to go, and so do we have a staff member that intends to go? Or do we up to council?
Well, we'd wait first for council to decide how many.
So if others might be interested in attending, as I said, 3 spots are reserved. I do intend to go and will be available, but if there are others who wish to go, please let that be known, and we will make arrangements to have councillors there. I think it's a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, so it compromises quorum for council, so we have to be a bit careful. Councillor Frechette.
I believe yesterday, when we were touring the seniors social space, that you had mentioned an occasion that's coming up that they requested some or all council to be available. Can you remind me what that was, please?
I did, thank you for reminding me. Yes, we have been invited, and council has been invited to meet with the seniors at Seniors Lounge. They had suggested 1:30 on January 12th. However, that conflicts with the offsite levies workshop that council has for that day. So I've been in communication with Janice Marks of the Senior Society, and they're prepared to change the time and date. So I will coordinate with her what might be available other than the 12th of January, and I will let people know. Is there anyone, well, I won't put it that way, who would like to attend that meeting? It's going to be specifically about senior space at the rebuilt Pine Grove. So it appears that everybody's interested in attending, so I will work with Janice Marks to try and find a suitable time.
Thank you.
Are there any other events involving councillors that should come to the attention of all of council? There is one more, and I can circulate it. Well, I don't need to, if I can just check my phones. We have been invited to join an APCO representative for lunch. And I may have to find that and circulate it because it appears to be hiding in my phone.
January 30th. Friday, January 30th.
Yes. All right, Friday, January 30th. If councillors are available, we're invited to have a lunch meeting with representatives of that college. If you might confirm that we will be there, and then councillors can figure out whether they can attend. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Waxer.
One other event which with the Jasper Artist Guild was their Buzz Fest, and it looks like it goes from January 15th to February 28th, but usually the opening would be the first day. So that's likely to be coming up soon.
I have been asked to speak on the 23rd.
Okay, so 23rd, that's enough. Again, another important event.
All right, if we have exhausted upcoming events, we move to agenda item 10. Councillor Hall. I have a motion from Councillor Hall that council adjourn at total time, 4:17 p.m. All those in favor? There are none opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Thanks to members of the public who continued watching on our Zoom platform, and to those who will watch on our YouTube channel later on, and to those who are here in the forum room in the gallery for at least part of the afternoon. And thank you to those staff who stuck it all the way through.